Hey there, and welcome to the weekly news recap here on Bald Prairie Real Estate. My name is Matthew Pfeifer from Real Estate in Regina, and as my trusted assistant Matilda, what we do here is go through the week's most interesting Canadian real estate news, read between the headlines, give you my opinion and thoughts on these different articles. We're going to be talking about how AI is going to be replacing me pretty soon, and what Canadian cities can a renter afford to actually buy a house in, plus a whole bunch of more really interesting articles. But as we always do, let's start off with another terrible joke. This comes from Sarah R. She put this joke up on a recent video. What did one eye say to the other? Something between us smells. If you have a terrible joke that I can use in a future episode, put in the comments below. Let's get into this week's news. Let's start off with what is quickly becoming a hot topic in the news. Remember, there's always something in the news that everybody's talking about. A few years ago, we were talking about the deferral cliff. Then we were talking about trigger rates last year. Now we're starting to talk about mortgage renewals. That is, of course, because as people start renewing their mortgages, most likely they're going to be renewing into a higher interest rate than what they're currently paying today. And how is that going to impact them? So let's do a quick educational piece on what happens at renewal. And remember, this is most of the time this is true. And for every rule, there's going to be an exception. It's going to be just a quick generalization. The first scenario is when somebody has been paying their mortgage on time as expected. In that case, more often than not, the bank is just going to send out a renewal notice, no requalification required. Again, most of the time, not always. If the person goes and they sign that renewal, boom, that mortgage has been renewed, and they continue on paying whatever that new payment is. Scenario number two here is when someone is shopping their mortgage around looking to move it to a new lender. They will have to requalify for that mortgage at those higher interest rates with the stress test if they move their mortgage. But one option that a homeowner often has, and this is if they have either 20% equity in the property or more, then they have potentially the option to refinance that property. When they refinance it, they have the ability, potentially again, to extend that mortgage out. So could it go from 20 to 25 years, 25 years to even 30 years. This of course means they're going to be paying their mortgage longer, but it will bring down that monthly payment. Again, this is typically only going to be available to somebody who has at least 20% equity in the property. So if they put 20% down and continue to pay it down over their first term, and the property didn't decline significantly in value, if it went up in value since they bought it, as long as they have that 20% equity with it, they're probably going to have the option to refinance that property, extend out that amortization, and drop that monthly payment. Now let's go through scenario number three, where they don't get a renewal and they're unable to requalify for their mortgage with a new lender. This is the scenario that a lot of people are talking about and thinking this is what's going to happen to a lot of homeowners, and it's entirely possible. But remember that the bank that first put the mortgage on that property, that first lent the money to those homeowners, is going to be on the hook for that property if the homeowner were to default and walk away from the property. So the banks really don't want this situation to come up. They, for the most part, are going to do everything they possibly can to keep the homeowner in that property and continue to pay a mortgage. They're going to find a way to structure a mortgage so that they don't have to take over that property, because the banks really don't want to go through the foreclosure process. It takes a long time in Canada. It's very expensive. And for the most part, it's not in the bank's best interest to do so. So they're going to do everything they can to keep that homeowner in that house. Now we've got a news article here where TD Bank is revising their forecast, saying that interest rates won't decline until late 2024. Now TD is just the first bank to revise their forecast. Pretty much every single bank, economists, real estate companies, everybody, myself included, was anticipating the Bank of Canada would start dropping interest rates later on this year. Now, I was expecting at most a quarter point or a half point in the later parts of the year. I didn't expect anything major. But the Bank of Canada has pretty much tossed that out the window now by not only raising interest rates again last month, but also indicating that they're probably going to continue to raise interest rates. But remember, the Bank of Canada can and will switch this up at the drop of a hat if they feel they need to. They've done it in the past and they will do it in the future. If they start seeing signs the economy is weakening or if inflation really starts coming down, there's a good chance the Bank of Canada will pivot. Just like if things start getting worse, they may ratchet up interest rates faster and higher. So with every forecast that comes out, please don't base your decision to buy or not buy on a forecast becoming true, because that's not a great plan. You buy a house when it makes sense for you. Don't buy or make a decision to buy based on a forecast coming true. Next up here, changing amortization and a cap on insured mortgages is not the answer to affordability, says CMHC. The pressure is starting to mount on CMHC and OSFI, that is the regulator for mortgages in Canada, to make changes, whether it is extending out amortizations or potentially making it easier for first-time homebuyers to get into the market by changing qualification requirements. And both of those organizations have been pretty steadfast on not making any changes. OSFI is even looking at potentially making it harder to qualify for a mortgage. Now, CMHC has come out and said, and I agree with what they're saying, that changing amortizations, making amortizations longer is not a solution. It's just a short-term fix, and it doesn't solve the underlying problems, and that is the lack of homes available to meet the demand from buyers. So by extending out amortization, you're actually going to create more demand because credit is easier to get. And all that does is end up costing homeowners more over the long run. They're going to pay more in interest. When you're buying a house, the goal of that should be to pay that house off as quickly as possible, not as slowly as possible, because not only are you going to save significant money in interest, if you look at the cost of a house in which you pay in interest over time, it's not hard to see that house costs twice as much money when you add up all the interest you pay. So the faster you can pay that down, the less interest you're going to pay. But of course, once you are removed from a mortgage payment, you've paid off that house, you don't have that obligation anymore, you have a significantly higher amount of disposable income to spend on other things in life. So extending out amortizations is going to take that away and make housing more expensive. CMHC also pointed out in this article, and this is something actually I think I should do a deeper dive on. So let me know in the bottom here in the comments if you want me to do a deeper dive. But the UK government recently had a program for first-time homebuyers where they granted significant and generous down payments to help first-time homebuyers get into the market. And all that happened was there was that initial push where all of a sudden houses became easier for first-time homebuyers to buy, but then very quickly the price of those starter homes increased by almost the exact same amount as what the grants that were given from the government to those first-time homebuyers totaled. So we were just right back to the same starting point that we were before. If you want me to do a deeper dive, let me know in the comments below. This article from BNN is how AI is changing real estate. In this article, they're talking about how AI can be used to help people search for homes. And honestly, that's the easiest part of buying a house, is the actual searching for a house, because it's the easiest thing for a real estate agent to do. It's also the easiest thing for a first-time home buyer to do. It's quick and easy to go on the internet and look for homes, but the websites themselves aren't that great. And that is what they're talking about here, where it's easier for somebody to go on something like, say, a tool like ChatGPT and type in 3-bedroom houses with 2 bathrooms in these specific neighborhoods. There's a pool and a fireplace and a garage. That's a lot easier to type that into a search box and have it give you results than to go through the websites and the drop-down menus and all the filters you have to check on and off, etc. One thing that the Canadian Real Estate Association does is every single year they send out to realtors, what do we need to do to help you be a better real estate agent? And every single year I respond to that survey and say, make realtor.ca easier and more powerful to use for home buyers. That is where they're going to look for homes. Let's make that better. And they've made small changes over the years, but this is where something like a ChatGPT could be very useful for home buyers, but it's only useful for those that really kind of already know what they're looking for. You've got to really define criteria. A lot of home buyers, they're not sure that first what exactly they're looking for. They kind of got an idea of what they're looking for, but they've got to go through that process. And this is where a good real estate agent will show their value. It's not just creating a search portal with an auto email and quickly sending people listings. It's explaining to those home buyers what to expect when they're buying a house, what that process is going to look like, what are the pitfalls, what do they need to know, what to look for in a house, education, all that stuff. That's what the good real estate agents will be doing for their home buyers. That's something that's going to take a while for AI to replicate. This article is looking at where can a renter afford to buy a house in Canada. I thought this was a great article from Point Two Homes looking at whether or not a renter could afford to buy a starter home in these various different cities. They looked at 50 different markets in Canada and broke them all down. Unsurprisingly, only 14 cities in Canada, according to the Point Two Homes definition here, that were actually affordable for a renter to be able to buy a home in Canada. Now I'm looking at doing kind of a similar video myself, and I'm gonna do a breakdown. We're gonna look at average household income and look at the benchmark price and find what are the most affordable, or what you might call the cheapest places in Canada to buy a house. So get subscribed so you don't miss that video. I'm hoping to have that out somewhat soon here. I'm working on it for a while, I know, but it's coming, don't worry. Call me completely shocked when this list came out. Toronto and Vancouver weren't on the list. But what they did was they were looking at what is the price of a starter home. And of course, what is a starter home? Well, the way Point 2 Homes did it, because it's going to vary wildly depending on what market you're looking at, is they took the benchmark price in that city and then cut it in half. So if the benchmark price was $500,000, then they said a starter home was a $250,000 purchase. And then they went and looked at, okay, if somebody was paying 5.75% interest, they had a 20% down payment, what would that monthly mortgage payment look like? And is it 30% or less than that average renter's household income? It shouldn't come as a surprise that on this list, it was dominated by cities from the prairies. I've talked a lot about how affordable the prairies are, but there was only one city on this list from the Maritimes. I talk a lot about how affordable the Maritimes are. The other major area represented in this list was Quebec, where they often not only have very affordable rent prices, but also some very affordable house prices. So I need to talk about Quebec a lot more on this channel because I kind of neglected them in the past. But let's go through the list here. Starting at number 3 was my market, Regina, Saskatchewan, where not only did Point 2 Homes determine that it was affordable for a renter to be able to buy a house, in fact, they had 40% more average household income than what was required to buy a house in Regina. Number 2 on the list was the only maritime city, that was St. John's, Newfoundland, where the average renter would have 50% more income than what was required to buy a house. And number 1 on the list was Edmonton, Alberta, where a renter, their average household income would be 52% above the minimum required income. The common theme on this list that Point 2 Homes put together where actually a renter could afford to buy a house in Canada was that starter home prices were around $200,000. Now, it's a really good article, so I'm going to put the full article in the description below so you can check it out and read through it all yourself. And if you are thinking about buying a house in Canada, if you're in Regina, of course, I'd love to help you out, but if you're in another area, don't worry, I can still help you out. In the description of this video is a link to my calendar where you can book me in for a buyer's consultation. I'm going to give you a call, learn about what's important to you in buying a house, but also what's important to you in a real estate agent, and then I'm going to get you paired up with the best real estate agent in your market. If you love this video, please give this video a like, subscribe to Bald Prairie Real Estate if you haven't already, leave some comments below so we can chat in the comment section, and as always, thanks very much for watching.